Good evening, church. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I'm surprised to see a few of y'all back tonight. I had a couple of different conversations after the sermon this morning. I'm not going to drop any names, but I was told by one person, I wasn't really expecting to come to church and receive a gut punch from my blood relative. From my own flesh and blood. If you weren't here this morning, we spent some time kind of staring into the mirror, diagnosing this heavy and reactive now attitude that we find ourselves running into quite often throughout our lives. And we established that the only escape is the radical faith that is found in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 3, where it says, "For you have died." We have to intentionally put that anxious, earthbound self to death. Tonight's message is a little different. Church, we serve a Savior who did not stay in the grave. The Christian story doesn't end at the cross, it explodes from the empty tomb. If we've died with Christ, we must now live from the reality of the resurrection. Our main text tonight is the same as it was this morning. We're going to look at it in a different light tonight. And it's the active command that's given to the resurrected believer in Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. It says, "If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory." So I want to point out tonight that the heaven attitude, it's not just checking out. It's leaning in. It's living with the confidence that the end of the story is already written. And it does three life-changing things. It reframes, reprioritizes, and refuels. We're going to look at all three of those. The first thing it does is the heaven attitude. It reframes our present. The heaven attitude changes how we view every struggle right here on earth. It replaces the tyranny of the immediate that we talked about this morning with the perspective of the eternal. The command here is to set your minds. This Greek word, phroneo, means to have a sustained mindset. It's kind of like, I hate using this example so much, but it's like setting your car's GPS to your final destination. You might hit some detours, but the GPS, it keeps pulling you back toward the goal. And the goal, it's not some vague cloud off in the distance. We're told it's where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Our minds are set on the throne, a reality of complete victory and of sovereign authority. And this reframes our suffering. The now attitude feels like we're drowning in every single wave of life. The heaven attitude, it sees this vast, glorious ocean beyond the waves. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 17, we read, "For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison." I really want you to picture this. Paul puts our suffering on one side of the scale. He says this light momentary affliction. And he puts the eternal reality on the other. Eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. Our troubles are not a pointless burden. They're a glory-producing engine. And this perspective is really our telescope of hope. It doesn't make the pain less real, but it brings the eternal reality into such sharp focus that the problems we experience by comparison, they begin to shrink in size. This also reframes our identity. We talked a little bit about this morning in Colossians 3 and verse 3. It says, well, I didn't put that in there. It says, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. You know, as you go throughout this week and anxiety and guilt starts to hit you, the now attitude would say, you know, you're a failure. You're exposed. And the heaven attitude says, my life is hidden in the safest, most secure place in the entire universe. I am a citizen of heaven just visiting earth. This security is the foundation of our peace. The heaven attitude, it reprioritizes our values. You know, if you truly believe that you're heading to eternity, you stop wasting you start wasting your time, stop wasting your life on things that aren't going to last. And this attacks the myth of ownership that we talked about this morning. Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, we read, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The now attitude asks the question, how can I get more comfort? How can I get more status? And how do I do that right now? The heaven attitude asks the question, what's going to last? You know, you can't take your couch, you can't take your car or your bank account with you, but you can send treasures on ahead. What are these treasures in heaven? What are the things that we can send ahead? What about people? What about relationships? One of the only things that we can take with us is other people. The heaven attitude, it compels us to forgive and to love because we're already so richly loved and we have Christ's forgiveness. Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 through 14, it says, put on then as God's chosen ones, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love. What's another thing that we could send ahead of us? What about our character? The fruit of the Spirit. Another thing that you can take with you is who you have become. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 18. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. I want you to think about this verse in this context. Has anybody here traveled to a foreign country? Whenever you travel to a foreign country, you have to exchange your currency. You know, your dollars aren't going to work there. You need the local currency. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 18 tells us that we're being transformed into the Lord's image. You know, the currency of heaven is the character of Christ. It's the fruit of the Spirit. When we step into eternity, we're not going to be measured by our bank accounts, but by our resemblance to Jesus. Every time you choose patience over anger, here, you're investing in your heavenly character. Every time you choose kindness over selfishness, you're packing your bags for eternity. We are right now in the process of becoming the people that we're going to be forever in eternity. The question is, when you arrive in heaven, will your character fit the atmosphere or will it feel foreign? The third and final thing that I came up with this is sacrificial service. Every act of quiet service done not for recognition, but for the glory of God is an investment that never depreciates. Philippians 2 verses 3 and 4 says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others." And then Romans chapter 12 and verse 1, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship." I really like this verse. It teaches us that sacrificial love, it doesn't mean that you're just dying for someone. It's about living for God. It reframes service as an act of worship. We can see this in the story of somebody that I'd never heard of until I started studying for this sermon. Has anybody ever heard of C.T. Studd? Chase shook his head, yes. I'm not alone. C.T. Studd was one of the most famous men in England in the 19th century. He was a brilliant and wealthy cricket star. He was actually the captain of the Cambridge cricket team, and he was really set up for a life of luxury. He had everything that the world could offer. But whenever he encountered the radical call of Christ, he had a decision to make. Invest in the now, invest in the fame and the fortune, the comfort, or invest in heaven, the souls, eternity, the mission. And he made this astonishing choice to give away his entire substantial inheritance. And he left England for the mission field, serving first in China, then he went to India, and then he finally moved on to the heart of Africa, where he died decades later. His friends and the whole country, they thought that C.T. Studd was insane. They said that he C.T., you're just wasting your life. You had all this stuff and you just threw it away. But C.T. understood Matthew 6 perfectly. He was simply moving his treasure from a bank that rusts to a bank that lasts forever. He demonstrated that when you truly set your minds on the things above, you will willingly sell everything you have for, the field containing the treasure. Our third point, the heaven attitude refuels our purpose. We talked about it a little bit this morning. The now attitude, it's fueled by fear and failure, the need for approval, and the desire to control. And that burns out pretty quickly. The heaven attitude is fueled by rest and security. Our purpose is fueled by the realization that our life is secure. Colossians 3 and verse 3 again, it says, "And your life is hidden with Christ in God." When you know that your life is hidden with Jesus, that makes you free to be bold. You're no longer living for security, you're living from security. Is that not the source of boldness? Shouldn't that be the source for our missionary zeal? C.T. Studd, whenever he was asked about, his radical life, I think he captured the attitude perfectly with one of his famous poems. He said, "Only one life 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." That confidence, that's our fuel. The worst thing that can happen to a citizen of heaven is that they go home sooner. They go to heaven sooner. This confidence, it also makes us ambassadors. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 20 says, "Therefore we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God." We are here to represent the culture of our eternal home. Our lives are meant to be a compelling, joyful preview of heaven, are they not? Does the way that you handle loss, the way that you budget your money, the way you talk about your enemies, does it make anyone wonder what kingdom you truly belong to? You know, the command that we're given in Colossians 3 is simple, but it's so profound. It says, "Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are of this earth." And I want to leave you, I know I gave you a couple steps this morning. I want to give you 3 more steps tonight to help set your minds for the week. And these are going to sound a little goofy, but I like goofy. That's just kind of who I am. Set your thermostat. Every morning before you check the news, check in with Jesus. Like I said this morning, read Colossians 3. Ask God to reset your mind's internal temperature from the now to the eternal. Check your treasure. Make one change this week that's clearly an act of a heaven attitude investment. You know, forgive that person. Sign up to serve. Give sacrificially. Check your treasure. Remember your passport. You know, when the now attitude starts to make you anxious or angry, stop and declare this truth. I am a citizen of heaven. This is not my home. I actually asked Tyler to lead that song for us as our invitation here in a minute. I really like that song. This world is not my home. I'm just passing through. You know, my life is hidden with Christ in God. So I have this question for you tonight. What are you building your life on? Maybe you've realized today that you've been investing in the wrong things, that you've been chasing comfort or you've been holding on to grudges rather than storing up heaven's currency. You know, if you need the prayers, like I said, this church family this morning, we would love nothing more than to pray with you about that. We want to help you reset your mind on the, from what is temporary to what is eternal. And we're ready to pray for you. Or perhaps that you've realized today that you lack the security of being hidden with Christ because you've not taken that first step. You know, you can't live the resurrected life if you've not buried the old one. Church, let's not wait until we get to heaven to start living like we belong there. Let's live with a heaven attitude moving forward after today. You know, whatever need that you might have tonight, we would love nothing more than to pray with you. Like I said, if you've not given your life over to Christ, if you've not buried the old life and been raised to the new, we would love to baptize you. I like what Chase has started doing with the youth group. Whenever we baptize somebody, making a big circle around here and singing songs. And whenever somebody comes out, you just hug their neck. This is really powerful to see. But if you have any need tonight, whatever it may be, we ask that you come while we stand in it, while we sing.